I'm sorry about that.
And pursuant to Chapter 22 in the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee will be conducted via remote participation. There will be a video recording available on request as soon as possible after the meeting. So we are being recorded. And with that, Roberta will do a roll call.
All right. I will call everyone who, in the order that you appear on the list. Heather?
Here.
Rose?
Here.
Laura?
Here.
Jahan?
Here.
Rebecca?
Here.
Tatiana?
Here.
Oh, welcome, Tatiana. And David Turin? I think we're expecting him to come a little bit late. So, with that, the first item on the agenda is public comment, and I see that the one member of the public who I can see in the in the webinar is Marcia Hannon, who is here to speak about Broadway House. So we can perhaps hold off until Broadway House, hold off on public comment for now, unless we see anyone else arrive or until we come to Broadway House. The next item on the agenda is preventative maintenance report. And we have Melissa Woods. I'm sorry, I have a hand raised from Marcia. Let's just, I'm going to give Marcia a chance to speak right now. I just have to figure out how to do this. Are you able to speak, Marcia?
Hello?
Are you able to unmute yourself?
I believe I'm unmuted now, but this is Michael. I'm working with Marcia. I was just wondering if I'm also signed in, or I may have signed in as her.
I see, yes.
Is Marcia
So
here
I
as
did
well?
Marcia's name twice. You're Michael?
Okay. So yeah, Michael W. From HRI and CASCAP, working with Marcia.
I didn't hear Michael, your last name?
Wolfson, WOLFSON. With Broadway with Marcia. Sorry, I think because I think I signed in as her.
Okay. All right, thank you. Did you have something that you wanted to add at this point in the meeting, or shall?
No, I was just checking to see if you saw me or if you saw Marcia. So thank you for clearing that up.
Okay. Thank you. All right, thanks. All right, so back to the preventative maintenance report. Melissa Woods is here from Capital Projects to give us an update.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to the CPC for having me this evening. My name is Melissa Woods. I'm the Director of Capital Projects, and also welcome to my attic renovation. So excuse the background, that's still sort of in development for times like these. I know hopefully we're on the tail end of COVID, but my office space for evening meetings is finally coming online. So thanks so much again for having me. You should have received in your inboxes a memo from Capital Projects and a maintenance report regarding the Prospect Hill Tower. When the CPC so graciously funded improvement to the Prospect Hill Tower, we, under condition, need to provide a preventative maintenance report every 5 years. And we had a little bit of change. The expectation was that Capital Projects was going to provide this information. And although we will still coordinate that work, the preventative maintenance for City of Somerville is done under the Buildings Division in the Department of Public Works. So the majority of the information that you see in front of you this evening is was written by Mark Hamill, the superintendent of buildings. The Prospect Hill Tower is in good condition. And if you read through the report, you'll see that there are some maintenance issues to address over the next 6 months prior to a spring walkthrough. We want to improve some of the areas where water is getting into the tower, which is to be expected because of the open fenestration. And outside of the project scope, the foundation wall that was not part of the project also could stand some improvement as well. So DPW is investigating that. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I have a question. So I was not on the committee at the time that it was funded. My suspicion is that it was done as a mechanism to make sure that the CPA funds went towards preservation projects and not towards deferred maintenance. So is there enough funds set aside at this point in time to kind of do the regular maintenance that the tower needs so that it continues to be in good shape and receive the attention that it deserves?
I don't want to speak to DPW funds specifically just because I'm not an expert in that. But although our fiscal health is quite good as a city, we have an incredible amount of investment that's needed in our existing building stock. So we will continue to push projects forward and be advocating the administration and working with our chief financial officer to prioritize those and really make sure that the CPC's investment is maintained. But we do not, as an organization, save pots of money for specific buildings and their maintenance over time. We just don't have the luxury of that. And it's not how municipal budgeting works, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think it's more sort of and hard to answer. So thank you. I think you did a good job.
Thank you. And I wasn't here either. So I think maybe I speak for the entire group to say that none of us were here when it was funded. But I'm pleased that sort of the paper trail exists, the institutional knowledge, the project manager for the Prospect Hill Tower is still in the capital projects division. So he's our local expert working now with Mark Hamill.
And so at this time, this is just sort of the layout of what you expect needs to be done, but you don't have a price tag on it yet, right? You're just kind of giving us the heads up.
Correct.
And maybe someday you'll be back with an application or somebody on your staff.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to Melissa for joining us this evening. That was really helpful to get the update and make sure that we are complying with our own conditions that we've placed on grants in the past, so that we can make sure that we're following through with the intention when we granted these funds. So next on the agenda for this evening, and I'm sorry, Heather, if you wanted to run the agenda, I'm just.
Oh, no, I think that's fine. I think we skipped the approval of meeting minutes.
You did, yes. So you can take that now, or we could take that at the end. It's up to you. It's your meeting.
Okay. Well, let's just go into the approval of meeting minutes and finish that up. I have one correction that's on page 2, third paragraph. We are talking about the Healy School tot lot. I think the last line of that paragraph should be changed to make it clear that the contaminated soils are not in the tot lot, but in the other adjacent project of the Healy School. So it could be something like, they are currently dealing with remediation of contaminated soils on the other Healy School project, which is not CPA funded. And that's the only, that was the only correction I had.
Okay.
If anyone else has any other comments on the meeting minutes,
I did not.
if you weren't here, you missed a terrific presentation by Rebecca.
A quick clarification, this is last month? This
was the meeting 2 weeks ago. That was our makeup meeting for the 2 prior months that we didn't have a quorum.
what I'm seeing in this, maybe I'm looking at the wrong notes, because I'm seeing something from June. Is it a recent meeting? Because I click on the link in Roberta's email for the 9:15 meeting notes, but what opens is dated June 22nd.
You know what? I wonder if I see what you're talking about, and I'm confused as to why.
But are those the correct minutes? But it's just the date is wrong.
Correct.
That's
Yes.
the wrong.
Those
Okay.
correct minutes.
So then we should change the date. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, David.
Yeah. I like to participate.
Good correction to me. I was very much rushing to squeeze this in time to get it in your meeting packet
It's
today.
totally fine. I was just like trying to figure out whether I was looking at the right minutes or not.
Yep. Good question.
All right, so if there's no other comments, or if there's any other comments, there's no other comments, then we need someone to move to accept the minutes.
I will move to make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second it.
It was moved by Laura, seconded by Rose. I'll call the roll. Jahan,
Yes.
Rebecca? yes. Tatiana?
Yes. Yes.
David?
Yes.
Right, and it passes. In the affirmative. Okay, so we're gonna go on from there to the Broadway House off-cycle requests for supplemental funds. So Roberta, if you wanna take us through that, that'd be great.
Yep. All right. Bear with me for a moment while I figure this out.
No problem.
All right. So, Marcia and Michael, I have made you both panelists. So at this point, you ought to be able to unmute yourselves and turn on your camera, and then we can figure out which of you is Marcia and which is Michael.
Thank you, Roberta. I'm not well-versed in GoTo, so that was very helpful. So thanks. Yeah, so thank you guys for tonight. And I'm project manager, and Michael, who is identified as me also, but is Michael Wolfson, is the construction specialist, and he and I have been working on this project to try and bring it in home here. And we were fortunate to get CPA funding and for historic resources for the replacement of the windows with historically accurate and energy efficient windows, and for exterior carpentry work. Our project also included a new kitchen and handicapped accessibility improvements, and we received $125,000 from the committee. We signed a contract in 21, and at that point we tried to firm up the bids and the pricing. And as I'm sure you're all well aware of, construction costs have been increasing quite rapidly. There's been a real shortage of labor, which has also made getting bids quite difficult. So it's been quite a challenge. Just a moment to tell you about 181 Broadway, because it is quite a handsome building, it's Queen Anne style. And just as important, it's affordable housing to young adults with psychiatric disabilities. It is a 24-hour staff program, and most of the people there come from either shelters or homelessness. So it's an important resource for the community, and we really appreciate the commitment that the city's shown towards here. So Michael and I have been working, put it back out, and tried working with different contractors. And due to the labor shortage, some of the initial contractors were overbooked and overscheduled. We've worked with other contractors. And at the end of the day, the supply, we can't control the entire construction industry. Costs have been increasing quite a bit, and the total money needed to do this work exceeds what we have with existing funds. So we're here asking for an additional $60,000 from the committee, and we are also, are committing funds here. I'm not sure what you can easily see, Roberta. In part of our package, I did submit a budget, which also showed the initial budget and the changes from that initial budget to now. So we're asking for this off cycle because these are custom windows. They've been approved by Historic. All of them are custom sizes. And it's at a point where it's extraordinary, but once they're ordered, it will be 30 to 38 weeks before they're delivered. So it's crazy. And, I don't know, Michael, if you want to add anything more about overall construction industry, but that's what we're up against these days. So if Michael, do you, I guess,
I could go on for days about the challenges of the construction industry. But yes, true on the windows, that was the feedback we got. And then some of, that was what was decided by the Historic on the single brand with custom specs. So, that sort of is what it is. And then lining up people agree with Marcia, because some of the contractors that were expressed interest and actually submitted a bid on the first draft, have dropped out since. Then others who just determined really weren't qualified for this, historic building for the quality work that it deserves.
So we really tried to do this in a way of, we're aware of the, the CPA funding being an important resource. So we have not asked for, in either the initial budget or this budget, anything for soft costs. This is strictly for hard costs here.
I guess, Marcia, I would add, if people are aware that, we did expand the scope somewhat in the time frame since the initial draft and award, not substantially, but a little bit. We had initially just done some repair work on the front gutters, and then, we've expanded the scope to replace those, because those are actually causing some of the damage. the way they're set up now. So, and a little bit more siding and trim work as well. So the money is not for the exact same award earlier. It's for a little extra.
So,
Can I jump in with a quick question? So will you, Marcia and Michael, will you just say again what the time difference was between the initial bids that you got, or the initial ask, and this?
So the initial bids, we submitted our initial application in September of 2020. So we got bids before then. And then we had signed the contract with CPA funds in August of 2021. And then
Okay.
we started putting it out to bid.
I was just looking through my old emails and notes, and when we had a meeting with Historic, I think it was in January of that 21, I guess it would be, and then continued on from there. We really didn't get replies back until April of that year.
Mm-hmm.
And then go ahead. Yes.
So I just have a brief question. So first of all, I appreciate the cost, both the material and labor costs increasing during this period. One thing I wanted to better understand is that have you had conversations with the contractors who are currently interested in completing the work, whether they could cap their cost, or if let's just say weeks and months go by? I certainly don't want this project to be out of scope from a financial perspective, because you've requested a certain amount of money and then things shift. So I just wanted to find out whether you've had any conversations with the contractor to address this matter.
So Michael, let me just respond to that in terms of, we've been talking with contractors off and on. We have a good bid there from Ironfish, who's one of the contractors, and also the Pella window representative has been out and pricing the windows. So our sticking point is knowing that we don't have sufficient funds. So I think if we're able to get additional funds here, we're well in conversations with the potential contractors and can move forward with signing a contract, because as you rightfully point out, most will only agree to a 30-day holding of their prices. So.
Right. I certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it looks like from the material you provided that right now the cost deficit's like 86 and you're asking for 60. And the kitchen renovations, are they completely out of the CPA funds?
Yes, they are. They're all non-CPA funds.
Okay. Because that looked like that was a total of out of
let's see, the kitchen is 32,000. The CPA funds are through historic resources, and so they're all for exterior work for the historic building.
Okay, so these funds are it's not that there's been extra projects added to the overall thing. It's really the same scope, more or less. It's just that the prices have changed that much, and the ability of being able to get the funds quickly or move quickly on it. I mentioned that added some to the timeline too. Okay, does anyone else have questions for Marcia and Michael? Roberta, do we have sufficient funds in our reserve to cover an ask like this?
Yes, we do. So the funds that we would use to cover an off-cycle application like this are the undesignated funds that have been carried over from prior years. So I'll be talking later about the administrative budget and showing what was budgeted last year, for example, and then what we actually spent last year. So that's where the money comes from that can cover an off-cycle request like this. So yes, we do have the funds to be able to cover this.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I have prepared a draft recommendation letter that the committee can do if you, you know, would like to fund this request. And if you wanted to put any conditions on it, that can be added to the recommendation letter as well.
Okay. And that's in the folder. Did I just miss that?
That's in the folder. I added it today. So
Oh, okay.
I can pull that up on the screen and share that with everyone. So I'm actually not sure what you can see. Actually, here I can tell what you can see. Sorry, this is the challenge of using GoToMeeting. It's very hard to manipulate what's on the screen. Okay. So you should see the recommendation letter in front of everything else. Is that what you see? Okay. I just have to reduce it to this. I'm pulling it down from a much bigger screen, so I have to reduce it so that we can see it on the shape of this screen. Okay. I think that's it now. So the letter recaps. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask the committee if we'd like to vote on whether or not to approve the funds first, and then discuss if there's any conditions, or if there's does anyone have conditions that they feel that they would like to propose for this project to go along with the approval of the funds? I personally do not.
I do not.
Hi,
Okay.
this is Dave. I feel like I raised this last meeting that I was on where a similar issue came up, and I was kind of, I feel like the committee or whatever we are should have a plan. You know, I mean, I think this is gonna be a really common thing, and I'm, you know, about, you know, the realities and, you know, post-COVID or post-current stage of COVID, whatever we are, of costs being a lot higher than were expected a year ago. And I feel like we should have some sort of a strategy about how we're addressing them. Is it just first come, first serve until our money is gone? Or do we have enough money for all of these cost overruns?
Well, to date, it's been first come, first serve. That as people
Right, but
ask for
I
their
raised a
funds.
similar concern the last one that came in, you know, and now
Yeah.
there's another one. And I think, you know, it's just kind of a question of, is when they get bids are going to be higher than they were expecting. And are we just going to approve them as they come in, or do we want to have a strategy?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a question that we ought to, I mean, I don't know. I defer to the committee. My thought was to separate that from the question of whether or not to award the funding to this project, but I don't know. You may feel otherwise, that this should all be part of the same discussion. So
Well,
I defer to.
I'm raising this, I mean, because yes, we can do that. But then when the next one comes in, it's going to be, you know, it'll be the same issue. And are we again kicking that can down the road of having a conversation, or should we have it?
Yeah. David, I think I appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's a really good point. And I would propose that there is something that we consider, and I don't think we should hold up this proposal. We should move forward with the approval of this, but in general, I think readiness to proceed should be a criteria. It should be how projects get ranked for funding. And if something isn't going to go forward for another year, it's not a priority.
And well, I think that's a perfectly valid approach. I'm actually kind of thinking of it a little differently, which is whether we should be looking for communities to have a higher, or applicants to have more of a fudge factor, anticipating that things are costing 25 or 30 or 40% more than they thought they were going to cost a year ago, and that be built into the funding decisions.
If I may respond to both of those statements. First of all, this is a project that might have been ready to proceed, but the city's processes took so long that that it delayed the project until it was struck by cost increase. So it may not be within the grantee's control in all cases.
Yeah.
And the second point that you just made, David, I wanted to speak to. I apologize. I forget what you had just said.
But some contingency being built in, or an additional cushion.
Contingency being built in. Thank you. That was what it was. So that is something that we can look at for the projects in the stream for initial funding going forward. But there are a limited number of projects that are in progress that we funded in the past. This is one of them. And there's probably maybe 3 or 4 other projects that are in progress that could potentially come back with budget increases.
Do we have the funds in hand, the surpluses in hand, to fund similarly scaled increases in costs for all of them? Because the point I'm trying to get to is not, I mean, well, I guess there's a certain, attribute of coming in sooner than later and asking for more money. I'm looking kind of not to try to just reward the first ones out of the gate, and then when the third one comes in saying, well, gee, we're sympathetic, but we don't have money anymore.
Well, I think realistically, one of the ones that is in progress that could potentially see a cost increase, what they may have to do is come back and ask for a change in phasing rather than an increase in funds.
Okay,
So
that's fine. That's fine if there's other mechanisms, to address the cost. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of dreading 3 months from now, another one coming in and saying, well, gee, we wish we could help you, but we've given out all of our excess funding.
I think there's another that I could imagine coming back with a similar sized request, and we could handle another similar sized request.
Okay, and that's fine.
Yeah. We have funds.
Because I'm having very similar things in my professional work. Is everything is costing 25 or 30 or 50% more than they thought when they originally proposed it.
I just want to point out on this recommendation letter, under where it says category historic preservation, it says Somerville Museum off-cycle funding request. And I think they're supposed to, same kind of mistake.
It's a very bad habit.
It's the cut and paste, try to get things done quickly way of doing things. I understand.
Thank you for catching that.
So are we, Is there any more questions or concerns that people would like to raise at this time, or would someone like to make a move? Make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we,
I can second that motion.
And the motion was to accept, to grant the funds?
yes.
Okay. Laura,
Yes.
Rebecca,
Yes.
Tatiana,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I also vote affirmative. So congratulations. We hope that this enables you to get it. We hope that you get the funds more speedily so that you are able to proceed and get those projects going and finished.
Great. Well, thank you guys very much. And we really, it really will make that difference. And we're very much eager to get this under contract and get those windows ordered and get everything started. So thank you. It will do that. So appreciate it.
So, Marcia and Michael, when I demote you from being panelists, there's a very good probability that you're going to get kicked out of our meeting altogether. So you are welcome to rejoin if you wanted to see the rest of the meeting. But so when I kick you out, you don't have to stay out if you don't choose to. I'm just going to make this anymore.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And appreciate the help with the go-to meeting too.
It's very hard to use. So
Thanks. Thank you all.
yeah.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is to look at the application cycle. We're going to look first at reviewing the schedule and the process, and then at the intent forms that we've received. We're doing pretty good at time. We're going to try and do this in 15 minutes. Roberta?
So yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm still switching between tasks. So the first thing that I wanted to bring up I am opening the calendar so that we can look at how the application cycle will proceed. I put in the other business folder in the meeting packet the CPC 2022 calendar, which is the calendar that we've seen in the past, and I have updated the last several months of the year so that it trouble opening it, so that it will reflect exactly how we intend to carry out the rest of this process. So I think I have it open and I will share. Oh, I think I am sharing. Am I still sharing and you can see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
I apologize for you having to watch everything I do. Then now I can see the screen again. Okay, so what we have done, what we would intend to do, so this month, you can take a sneak preview at all the eligibility determination forms that have been received, and you will see that we have a very competitive funding round coming up for the historic preservation projects in particular. So we want to think about the rest of what we see over the next couple of months through the lens of how are we going to use our evaluation criteria, or ask the applicants for alternative budgets and scopes that would enable them to phase their projects over a few years so that they can reduce what they're asking for this year. So that will enable us. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. But first, this month we're going to be looking at that and thinking about how to approach the application cycle going forward. The other thing that we will see is that we have a long list of applications, EDFs that have been submitted. So we want to think about in October. It's probably not realistic to have the applicant presentations all on one night. So I'm going to be asking if the committee can meet a second night in October so that we can split up the applicant presentations over 2 nights. And so we would have the applicant presentations in October, and then in November, begin deliberating on the applications. I suggested that you might begin the deliberations with the historic preservation projects because that's going to be the largest, the most challenging to decide between, and then in December vote on or deliberate on the open space and recreation projects. Or you might want to take it in reverse because the open space and recreation projects might use some of the flexible funds, so that you would need to know how much flexible funds will be available for the historic preservation projects. So maybe we should take a look at the eligibility determination forms first, and then go back and think about how far, how much we want to tie down this schedule in advance. And then, I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around as I always do. After deliberating between November and December, then the target would be to be able to vote on recommendations in December. But that's a self-inflicted deadline. And if you didn't feel ready to make a vote in December, you can take as long as you feel you need to. With that, I'm going to open the eligibility determination forms. Summary. Bear with me for a moment. I'll pull that down on the screen. All right, so you should see, I think you do see the summary sheet of all the eligibility determination forms. I'll just try to shrink that so that we can see more of it on the screen at once.
Roberta, you may want to check and make sure that all the historic preservation is showing, because some of them were hidden again. Yeah, the line number 4 and number 7 are hidden.
Okay. Thank you for finding that. I'm not sure why those ever got hidden in the first
Yeah, it keeps
place.
happening.
I think that's all of them. You should be able to see them all now. So what we've received, and I want to see what you see. Okay. I might increase the size of it a little bit more again. So what we've received so far or not so far, the applications that are in the stream for this year are another application from the Elizabeth Peabody House, from Grace Baptist Church, that is the Somerville Hispanic Association for Community Development, Somerville Museum for more for the preservation of some of their artifacts. The Adams Magoon House, the 90 Union Square, which is the building that the Community Access TV is in right now. Mudflat Studio, the Carriage House at 73 Concord. And then there are a couple of projects that show up on the screen. These are maybe the ones that ought to be hidden. They were either deemed to be ineligible or never, yeah, they were essentially, both of these projects were deemed to be ineligible and did not, are not going to proceed. So I will hide these rows. And then on the open space and recreation side, we have a project by Myra for a path improvement at Blessing of the Bay, construction for Junction Park, construction for Henry Hansen Park, design for 217 Somerville Ave, a new park, and the groundworks project is actually going to be withdrawn for this funding round. They may come back in a future funding round.
Okay.
And then the other projects were either, for one reason or another, didn't submit eligibility determination forms this year, may come back in the future. So altogether, these requests total for historic preservation $3.5 million. For the open space and recreation, it totals $945,000.
Wow. That's interesting.
So the $945,000 compared with the available funding of $772,000, the flexible funds would enable the open space and recreation projects to be able to fund all of them if the final full applications have the same budget as the preliminary budget estimate from the eligibility determination form. On the historic preservation side, obviously, 3.5 million compared with $450,000, there's a huge discrepancy. Now, these are just the estimated request. These are not the final request as the full applications will have full estimates that go along with the request. And some of the larger requests are for the full picture, and they may have the intention of phasing over a couple of years anyway, and we'll learn more when we see the full applications. So for example, Grace Baptist Church, this is the Hispanic Association for Community Development, the estimated request for $1 million, we can anticipate that that will include a scenario for breaking this into smaller phasing so that they can go forward with a smaller amount this round. And the same is true for the Adams Magoon House, which is an $800,000 request. That will also be broken into phasing in the full application. So some of the other projects, I'm not sure whether they may be phased or whether you may have to consider applying the evaluation criteria to determine which are the highest priority projects to fund this round. And all together, I believe we have, I'm going to count, we have 4 open space and recreation projects going forward, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think 7 historic preservation projects. So there's 11 projects that we would anticipate having presentations for. Yes, Rose.
Roberta, do you know if there are any of the historic preservation projects that could be considered crossover with the Affordable Housing Trust? any of them that have elements of housing in them that we could, where some of the funding requests could be split between historic and housing?
Not at the moment. Not on the surface. There are a couple of these projects that have been listed. There's one that's still missing from what shows, and I'm going to
I thought, doesn't Elizabeth Peabody House have a housing component? Or am I wrong about that?
no, I don't believe they do. There is still a project missing. So there's one project that's missing from what you see on this list. In the folder are all of the eligibility determination forms. And there's one for 336 Broadway that for some reason got bumped. I wonder, like, I'm not quite sure why this list is incomplete. I thought it was copied directly from the one that I was working on. Anyway, there are 3 of these projects that are on the list, including the one that doesn't appear in the summary, are for private homes. That includes the Adams Magoon House, 73 Concord, and one that's at 338 Broadway. Maybe there could be a negotiation to acquire a deed restriction, as you know, if we were putting a significant amount of funding into preserving the house. But that may or may not be, you know, the desire of the city or of the homeowner. So yeah, on its face, none of these are affordable housing projects.
Okay. Or shelter projects. There's not, Grace Baptist Church doesn't have a shelter component to it.
No,
I believe it does.
They had a shelter as a tenant, and I believe that they no longer do. So that tenancy the shelter is no longer a tenant of the Grace Baptist Church, and there's, I think, a child care operation has taken the place, which is also just not a housing need.
Yep.
Now, several of these are organizations that serve the public or serve low-income residents in the city. They have anti-poverty programs, and that includes the Elizabeth Peabody House, the Hispanic Association for Community Development. Yeah, those 2 are private organizations with anti-poverty components, and then 90 Union Square is a city of Somerville. And then there's private homeowners and a private business, which actually I think it is not a business, but also a nonprofit organization, an arts organization. So in the folder, the meeting packet for this evening is a folder that contains all of the actual eligibility determination forms that we received, as well as a subfolder with response letters that I sent to all of the applicants. And there's a subfolder with additional information about the artifacts that the Somerville Museum has requested funds to preserve. So I can let you review those, and I will go after the fact and upload a corrected summary file so that you have all of the projects listed in the summary file.
I think before we get too far into the individual eligibility forms, I'd like to discuss the schedule that you sort of started out with. And get people's input on that. So assuming we have 11 applicants or 11 presentations that are to be made by the applicants, if they each had 10 minutes, that would be 2 hours. That would be, you know, about 120 minutes or something like that, which feels like we could do that in one night.
That's the limit.
Yeah. Rather than split it into 2 evenings. What was the other business you wanted to get? Can you put that schedule back up for a second?
Sure, let me find the schedule. So you can see the schedule?
Yeah. So I guess I'm inclined to sort of give them 10 minutes each and to have one long night. And I will do 2 nights if that's what the rest of the committee prefers. But does anyone else want to kind of address that? I guess the other point of concern, and I know we've kind of chatted about this, or Roberta and I have chatted about this a little bit, but I'm not sure about doing. I see the logic of doing like historic preservation and open space, kind of like, you know, cutting them up into 2 different silos, but I am a little concerned knowing how the flexible fund does play into sort of making all of the requests balance and work, that if we're not dealing with the whole all the moving pieces at the same time, it's possible. I mean, from what Rebecca was just presenting, it looks like it could be fairly clean to separate them. But I'm also looking for people's thoughts and preferences on that. Jahan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I share your thoughts about keeping it to one meeting or one meeting session. Granted, it may be on the longer side, but I think that it'll be conducive towards not only reviewing the applicant presentations, but also it'll be top of mind for us to say, you know, we've seen 11 applicants, and we can make we take the necessary notes and make the determinations at a later point in time. Also, the other factor that I'm sensitive to is this primarily applies to Roberta. You know, Roberta will be tasked to find a mutually acceptable time for not only all the committee members here, but also the applicants as well, and that may be administratively cumbersome. So I just want to share those thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, my preference would also be to have one long night, and maybe would address that the other issue of like kind of what you were talking about, Heather, having everything presented at the same time. We can have it in our minds fresh as we vet through and determine what makes sense with the funding.
Because that's a separate meeting. So we'll have the night where people present and we have a discussion with them and ask them questions. We may ask them to face their project or something like that, and then we'll deliberate in a separate meeting.
Right.
And then the question is whether that deliberation is November and December, or if we try to deliberate in November on all of them, and then we're sort of like reviewing the recommendation letters and approving them in December. I think it would be possible to divide them if we wanted to do it that way, but Rose?
I would agree that it makes sense to try to pack it into one night. And if we're, I mean, I think I don't want to take their fun away, but if we're being sort of prescriptive about the presentations and saying this is, you've got a really limited amount of time, and these are the bullets that we need you to hit in your presentation, and just keep it to, you know, we can give them a guideline, and if we do that, maybe it's easier to keep them on track.
My inclination, if you'd like to do it all in one night and give everyone, and I just want to correct that there were 11 projects that we counted on the screen, and then one more that was missing. So that's 12 projects that we expect out of them. So if we give them 10 minutes apiece, that we want to ask them to give their presentations in 1 to 2 minutes, and then leave the maximum amount of time for Q&A, because this is really going to be your opportunity to learn what you need to learn about the projects. So you'll have the applications that give kind of the overview of each of the projects. So we don't want to use a lot of meeting time reviewing information that you already have in the applications. You want to reserve that 10 minutes for the time to learn what you don't already know.
That makes sense.
So I'm suggesting then, based on your feedback just now, that in November, you could go ahead. So it's going to be in November, that's going to begin with, I will have delivered a fall report that has a status update for all the projects. We don't have to talk about the status update. That can just be in your meeting packet for your information. But we do need to talk about the budget correction that has to be made so that we know what the exact amount of available funds is before you begin to deliberate on the projects. So that will be the beginning of the November meeting, and then you can spend the balance of the time in the deliberation process covering whatever projects in whatever order you are inclined to take them. And then if you need to, you can continue the deliberation in the December meeting. And what I wanted to also, I'm sorry, one thing, I've instructed the applicants, I've given them a timeline stating that, you know, we won't accept any additional application material after I'm giving them to October 19 to send along any late pieces. But what you may want to do is at the meeting in October, if the committee wants to ask for additional information, in particular for a phasing plan or an alternative scope, then they can follow up. They'll have a week to follow up with any information that the committee's asked them for that will help your deliberation in November.
I think that makes sense. I have to say, I feel nervous about encouraging people to think about phasing. Just from my experience, I think that it's that often phasing projects makes them end up being much less efficient and much more expensive. Just because you've got contractors coming out multiple times over a longer period, and it's the mobilizing and getting everybody into the getting the construction crews on the site that's so hard, and then to have them leave and come back, you just lose a lot of efficiency. And that's not to say I mean I think that we do have to be creative about how to we have a funding gap. We have a bigger ask than we have funds available. But I'd love to think about ways other than phasing that we might be able to address it, if that makes sense.
I don't know if this is the right project for it, but we've done bonding in the past for large asks when we've wanted to do them. So one of them was the 100 Homes project. The other one was the library over in Davis, the Central Library. And it's different because that's a city-owned building. I don't know how we feel about bonding when it's a nonprofit organization that could be fluid in its leadership. I don't know. It just seems a little different than bonding for an agency that's. But that would be another tool.
Yeah. And we did approve the bonds for Clarendon.
Yes. Yeah. So I think those are probably the three instances. Last meeting we talked about the art farm funds being that PSEF would write a letter kind of not rescinding, but like turning it down. So it never made it. The art farm funds never made it to city council, and then it itself, the site has been complicated by all the construction and utility work that has to happen around there. So it's kind of on a very long limbo. And so the idea was that when it's ready, it would come back with a new grant rather than tying up those funds, continuing to tie up those funds. It's one of the first projects, I think, awarded. So it's been quite some time that it's been there. So if that money was returned to the pot, is that actually a line item that might come back into the budget, or was it never removed from the budget because it never went to city council?
It was never removed from the budget because it never went to city council. So
Okay.
that's another item that's in the available funds pool, or it looks like available funds, but it's something that as long as it's hanging out there, we have to always keep those funds available in case they do get approved by city council.
So it would free up some monies.
Yeah.
In the overall counting. If PSEF could move on that letter for this funding cycle, even, that would be even better. I don't know if it can happen that quickly, but if it could, that'd be great.
Yeah, that should be no problem.
Okay. So are we kind of coming to the conclusion that the October meeting will be, we'll have all of the applicants, and we will give them no more, let's just say 8 minutes, and then, but we kind of know that it might be whatever, that they should make their presentation in 3 minutes. And we work with design students all the time who have to pack a lot into a short presentation time. You can get a lot done in that time. And then we will in November attempt to discuss all of the projects and have a continuance into December if that's what's needed, or that may be making the final recommendations for the letters, but we'll attempt to sort of balance the budget as a whole with all the projects in play. Okay. All right. So I think you already updated that on your calendar. All right. Sounds good. Is there, do you want to go back to the individual EDFs, or?
I didn't have the intention of going through them all individually.
Okay.
You have them that you can review them. The kind of a summary of what's important to know about them is in the summary document in the notes. So, you know, it's there for your review, but
I would add on the mudflat application. So the mudflat application, their building, which is on Broadway, is an old theater. It is on the Mass Registry of Historic Places, which they don't say that outright in their application, but it is. So it's a registered historic place. It's really quite a beautiful old building, and I just wanted to emphasize that it is registered. I didn't have time to check Union Square, the cupola at Union Square, but I did check that one. I'm a little confused by the couple who have the carriage house that are applying. I just looked at Google Maps where it's sort of visible from the street, but it's a funny lot, and it's kind of behind the house. The house sort of faces sideways. It's not that visible. And I wish we had someone from the Historic Preservation Committee who could be a part of this grant round for sure, because I think we're going to be needing some of their expertise on the value of some of these resources and which ones which ones does the Historic Preservation Commission see as really important cultural resources.
I can ask our historic staff if they can. All of the projects were required to go to the HPC for an advisory review as part of their application process, and all but one has already completed that advisory review. One of them is going to be going next week. So I can ask that they can provide us with either minutes from that advisory review meeting or just a summary of what was discussed at that meeting, so that you could at least have that much communication back from HPC.
Yeah.
The purpose of the advisory review is just so that the applicants understand ahead of time what is going to be required of them by HPC in order to comply with the Secretary of Interior standards.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Do you know, Roberta, is there a difference between the sort of what the HPC and HPC qualification versus the CPA qualification? It feels a little bit like that we're evaluating it with different criteria, which is I think is right.
Yes. So our criteria, the CPC is determining whether this merits funding. The HPC have a few different roles. Their first role is to ensure if they're using our money, they have to ensure that the project is following Secretary of Interior standards. So they're asking, is the work that's being conducted meeting standards? Secondly, depending, different projects have different regulatory controls. So HPC has to determine whether they're meeting any regulatory requirements that pertain to HPC. And that's further down the process. So, before they can do any work, they have to obtain building permits. And if HPC has any jurisdiction over that building, then they have to approve the work as part of the permitting process. But that's separate from our funding process. But before we give money, we need the applicant to know that they're going to have to meet those standards in the future. So we want to make sure that the applicant is preparing a scope and a budget that is appropriate for what will be required by HPC. So that's why we meet with them at the same time. So before the applicant prepares their scope and budget, they need to meet with HPC to make sure they understand what needs to be in their scope.
Yeah. When you get the information from the Historic Preservation Commission, I guess part of it is like, I'd like to understand just a little bit about like why that carriage house is considered sort of an important historic structure,
So the carriage house is considered to be a significant structure because I'm not sure that I can explain it exactly correctly. There is a memorandum of understanding on the carriage house, which is essentially an agreement that a previous property owner made with the city, promising to preserve that building in its historic condition. And that is filed at the registry. So it's attached to their deed that this memorandum of understanding exists with the city, promising to preserve it. So it's not exactly the same as a conservation restriction, but it kind of has a similar function as the conservation restriction. So they're required to preserve the historic carriage house according to this attachment to their deed.
But we're not, are we required to pay for the preservation? I mean, we're
They
just
are not.
Yeah.
No, that's a responsibility that the homeowner took on when they purchased the property that had this memorandum of understanding attached to it.
Are there normally public access or, like, is there a community, access component of using the funds? Like, I'm trying to think.
At a minimum, historic preservation funds for a building that doesn't have public access, like that's not a public building, at a minimum, it should be visible from the street. And so it should be, I mean, there needs to be a public benefit. The public benefit can be its visibility from the street. Or if there's a preservation restriction already on the building, then that essentially the city owns an interest in that building, and the interest is its historic condition. Thus, we can pay for any improvements to preserve the historic condition that we have an interest in. But in this case, for the carriage house, I think the only public interest is its visibility from the street at the moment.
And I forget, what was the nature of the agreement with the prior owner? What was that called? What do you call it?
A memorandum of agreement,
So did they receive like a tax benefit for making this agreement with the city?
that is beyond my knowledge. So I could ask for more information from HPC about what
Because I'm wondering if they're already reaping the benefit, so to speak, of having made this agreement, or come to this agreement, in the form of a, a property tax abatement.
I don't think there was a property tax abatement. But I'm not sure what was the nature of it, like what we gained from that memorandum of agreement.
Yeah, or what they gained by agreeing to it, the previous owner.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, this is actually really helpful, so I can go and get this additional information that you need to support this, to support your deliberation.
I had a question about the, what is it? I'm sorry, the groundworks, open space and recreation application that shows this withdrawn.
So before you ask your question, this is a project that will be withdrawn. The application, they're going to be withdrawing from the application process this round because of staffing changes at Groundwork Somerville. So you can still ask your question if you want, but it may be moved.
Have we funded that traditionally, like over some period of years?
The school gardens, there was a school garden project in the past, and this is the second pass at school garden improvements.
So they're a nice thing, and I'm sad, and I understand the realities of budgets and staff and so forth, but I hate to think of the whole thing kind of falling by the wayside unless they'll manage some other way.
Hopefully it'll come back in a future funding round. Were there other projects that you had questions or comments about, or would you find it useful to go through all of the EDFs?
I don't think, not on the call, not now. I think it's helpful to have them, and so we can all go through them. That's my take.
I think it would be, I'd value if you had any questions you wanted to contact me directly between now and the next meeting, because you're trying to absorb a lot of information in just a couple of meetings and to be able to process that information in a couple of meetings. So if you have a chance to read through all of these and you have questions that you'd like me to gather more information about or give feedback to the applicants, I would be happy to take your input and then be able to look for more information that I can provide to you at the future meetings.
So I did notice that so PSEF put in an EDF for the acquisition of an open parcel on Somerville Avenue, and there was no application for the open space fund. So it felt like that was sort of the wash, because they had a particular parcel they had in mind that they were applying for, and then not. So they're leaving the open space fund sort of untouched.
No,
The acquisition fund.
The city has already acquired 217 Somerville Ave, so this is a application for design.
Okay, I just totally read that wrong then.
All right.
All right, so I think if you haven't already, to go through those forms, and if you have specific questions about it that you want to shoot off to Roberta so she can either prep the applicant or chase down the information, it will make us that much more efficient next month.
Next month.
when we go through the applications.
It'll just seem like next week.
Yeah. Shall we move on to the next item?
Sure. So next item I hope is very quick. Assigning a member to serve on the selection committee for the general public member.
So we have one member, we just recently reviewed this process and approved a new process. And so we have a member from Historic Commission and Affordable Housing and Conservation, and then we as a committee are sending a member from the committee to join, and then Roberta's there. So we're looking for someone from this group, and I'm going to put Laura on the hot seat and nominate her as a candidate for this search committee. But if anyone else would like to throw their hat in the ring, please do so. All right, Laura, would you be willing to serve on the search committee?
Roberta, can you tell me a little bit more about how the number of meetings that this will probably take?
We're planning on 2 meetings. One meeting to select the finalists and a second meeting to interview the finalists and make a decision at the same time.
Oh, okay, at the second meeting.
Yeah.
And virtual or in person or TPD?
All virtual. Yes.
Okay. All right. I accept.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other business?
Yeah, I'd have just a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. First of all, back to the calendar. I spoke with most of you at the meeting, at our previous meeting on September 15, but we have an event coming up this Sunday, the Tufts Community Day, which is, we're going to have a table for the CPC combined with Medford CPC, and I don't actually have anyone to represent Somerville right now. So the only folks who have not already weighed in and said, sorry, I'm out of town that day, are Rose and David. So I don't know, to put you on the spot, if you had any availability on Sunday.
What's the time frame?
The time frame is the event is 11 to 3, and I encourage you all to go. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't been to Community Day before, there's a big free lunch, and there's lots of activities and lots of tables representing organizations across both Somerville and Medford and Tufts University. So
I'm sorry, it's a Sunday. Sunday, not Saturday?
Sunday, 11 to 3.
11 to 3.
Yeah. You can let me know afterward if you want to think about it. I would, fortunately, Medford's committee have a lot of availability, and so I have the Medford side covered. So there'll be somebody at the table if none of you can make it, but I think it would be really great if somebody could be there who can talk about Somerville as well. I can only be there for a chunk in the middle of the date. So I'll have an album of Somerville projects, and I'll try to have a way that we can calculate how many people who respond to the instant poll are Somerville folks versus Medford folks, but or Tufts University students who don't actually even know which community they live in. So we'll find a way to handle it, but you can let me know, Rose or David or anyone else, if you could possibly be there Sunday.
Yeah, I will have to confirm with my way better half, but I might be able to do at least a portion of it.
I
That
could
would be
definitely do 1 to 3. I have a hard time getting there before 1, but I could do 1 to 3.
great, wonderful.
So I might be able to do 11 to 1 pretty easily.
That would be wonderful. Thank you guys both. So I'll move on to reviewing the administrative budget. I already kicked this over from the last meeting, so I'll just bring it up and quickly talk about it at this meeting. I put this in the meeting packet because when I reviewed the procedures that were left behind by previous CPA administrators, one of the instructions was that every year the coordinator should present the administrative budget to the CPC. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what the administrative budget looks like. I'm opening that on my screen right now and bringing it down to the screen that you can see. So you should be able to see the administrative budget right now. You know, first of all, pardon that it says FY20 administrative budget at the top. I didn't notice that until this evening when I was looking it over. This is actually the FY23 administrative budget. So the total administrative budget is 5% of the CPA funds every year. So for FY23, 5% was 113,000. And first, the salary is the largest expense that comes out. I'm sorry, the total available was 193,000. And the largest expense that comes out of that is the salary for my own salary, the CPA manager. And then after that, the available funds for expenses are $113,000. Sorry, I'm going to zoom in my screen a little bit. So then there are several anticipated expenses that we have throughout the year. Anticipated expenses based on what we've written into prior budgets. These are just in case. And in some cases, we've added a few new anticipated expenses where we've had expenses. So the FY22 budgeted amount is what the administrative budget looked like last year, and FY22 actual is what we actually spent last year. So based on what we see for expenses, we've budgeted for these expenses. And then the remainder after the anticipated expenses is what we put into the professional and technical budget. So that is 86,000 for this year. Professional and technical budget is what we can tap into at our discretion if we feel that we need to hire a consultant or any other services for special projects throughout the year. In the past, we've had a program evaluation that we commissioned tough students to prepare for us, for example. That came out of the professional and technical budget. And just to note that if we have any unanticipated expenses, we can move around the budget at any time. So this is really, the budget is estimated but not fixed. And any funds, you can see that last year the expenses we had budgeted 93,000, but actually only spent 27,000. And any funds that are left over that are not spent are funds that are put into at the end of the year, are rolled into the program funds, so that becomes part of what we have available should we have any off-cycle applications as we're experiencing this year. So, you know, we had well over $100,000 of, or about $100,000 last year of unused administrative funds that rolled over into our program fund budget. So I think that's all that I wanted to talk about the administrative budget, but I'd be happy to take any questions if you had.
I have a quick question about in the top part. So the salary manager,
Yes.
the 80,000 isn't 90% of the total available. Is it 90% of the manager's salary?
Yes.
Okay, because I was just like, that
Some
doesn't.
of my salary comes from the city's general fund budget, which enables me to be flexible
No,
about.
80,000. So it's the absolute value. 80,000 goes toward your budget, toward your
Yes,
salary. Okay, not 90% of the available funding.
correct.
Okay.
All right. Then the other thing that I just wanted to mention was vacancies. I mentioned this at the previous meeting, but just putting it out there again. In addition to the vacancy that will be conducting the selection committee process for this round, we also have 2 other vacancies on the committee right now for the Housing Authority representative and the Historic Preservation Commission representative. So with respect to the Housing Authority, I was given an update about a month ago, the end of August. I was given an update that the mayor would be submitting some candidates for council approval at an upcoming council meeting for the Housing Authority board. And then after the new board members are appointed for the Housing Authority, then they're going to select a board member to serve on our committee. So I have not received an update yet from them about whether the council has approved their candidates so that they can fill their board, but anticipate that that should be happening soon, hopefully. And then we could see a new rep from the Housing Authority in the next few months. The Historic Preservation Commission is soliciting for new members to join right now. If you know anybody who would have an interest in joining the Historic Preservation Commission, they currently have 5 vacancies that they're looking to fill. So there's quite a lot of room on that board. And that's all I have for this evening.
Great. Can we put on the November meeting, and I'm not sure we'll get to it, somewhere in November or December, to revisit this policy to discuss emergency fund off-cycle requests? Because it's a part of this whole sort of setting the budget and granting the awards. I think we should touch base on that again.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. I think that's it for me. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add? All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Sure, motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right. Rose?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Jahan?
Yes.
Tatiana?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then I approve as well. So thank you, everyone. It was nice to see you all this evening. And we've got a big meeting next month.
Next month.
Next month.
Heather is in between.
It feels pretty regular. and see you all then. Okay.
Okay. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Okay.
Nice.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.